what do I wish I did differently? Like first step, find a habit. Like don't think about goals or motivation or any of that. Just like first step, one habit.
And welcome to Moving Through Menopause. And today I'm really excited to have a wonderful guest, Dr. Dalton Combs. And today we are going to be talking all about understanding the causes and consequences of human behaviour. And the consequences we might be all too familiar with, but it's really getting to grips with what makes us do what we do, or maybe what gets in the way of us doing those things that we know would be so good for us to do. And, this is really where I'm always on the lookout for top tips, how to help people to incorporate the lifestyle measures that we know are so good for us into our everyday lives and not let another day go by without having done at least some of what we set out to do. Welcome, Dr. Dalton, to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon on Moving Through Menopause. I'm really intrigued to dive into a conversation all about the causes and consequences of our human failings, perhaps, our habits, and the things that really get in the way of us making the decisions that are going to promote health. Ultimately, that is something that I'm so passionate about. Tell us all about you and what you've been up to.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Dalton. And a few years ago, I got a PhD in neuroeconomics from the University of Southern California, where my thesis was on behavior change and habits and how our automatic brain and our deliberative brain like work together and against each other to make the behaviors that make us who we are. And I think something particularly relevant to your audience is about change, right? So behavior change, right? So our habits are very difficult to change, and menopause is a time of large changes. And working with or against those habits of, because our habits, it's great that they're sticky. It's great that they're automatic. That means we don't have to be on and thinking about every little decision in our lives. Like we can be on autopilot. But the difficult part comes when your autopilot is no longer serving your highest goals for yourself, when that autopilot isn't doing the things that you want it to do because your life has changed.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that maybe they were never serving you, is the thing, actually. But this time of menopause is a time when we stop getting away with the things that we've been getting away with up until this point. And so yeah, I mean, it's a time when lots of people are reevaluating and thinking that there's room for improvement in this, my version of my life, and how to go about it, and really just banging their heads on the wall often that this is a really difficult thing for people to do, because there is an awful lot of science in this, and we like to think that we're original and we're unique, and of course we are. But there's a lot of stuff going on that we can draw upon to inform these decisions that we've got to make and the choices that we make.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, just because a struggle is common or is something that everyone goes through, it doesn't mean it's inauthentic, or that doesn't mean it's not difficult, right? Even if it's something that everyone struggles with, it's still a big part of your life. It's still valid to you. It matters.
Yeah.
So I focus on food choices in particular, generally, but even beyond food choices, the first thing I would recommend for people is how to change their attitude towards their perspective towards their behavior is to start thinking about the habits in their life and looking at what they do automatically. And a great exercise for sort of waking up to this frame of your life is thinking about what are the things that you do automatically when you either, the most common one is like get in the car. So when you get in the car, what are the things you do automatically? Because most people have a really scripted sequence of like A, B, C, D that they just, without thinking, sort of walk down, right? And so that can be a good opportunity to sort of watch your mind and watch how you're moving in the world in this sort of automatic mode. And as you get used to watching yourself in this automatic mode, you can start applying this in other places. So like that's just a place to train and learn to see this way. And then once you can see this way, you can start to see it in your relationship with food, for example. So when you go to the refrigerator is another time where people tend to have really scripted these sort of automatic behaviors. And you can learn to see these and say like, oh, I do this automatically. I do this automatically. And it's always in this context, I do this automatically. And then the next thing beyond that is, what do I do about it? Right? So once you notice you have a really stereotyped behavior of in situation A, I always do B, what is C? Like, what do you wish you did instead? So when you're in situation A, what do you wish that you did instead? And then actually implementing those goals is stage 3. And so, for example, maybe not so much these days, but a lot of people used to light a cigarette, like very first thing when they get in the car, right? And a really helpful alternative is like grabbing a piece of gum, right? And chewing a piece of gum. And if you were trying to just stop smoking when you get in the car, that would be very hard. That's a very hard behavior change. It's very hard to totally delete a habit. It's much easier to replace a habit. So you replace it with grabbing a piece of gum. And how do you pave that path? Well, you put the pack of gum where your cigarettes used to be. And so you do this intervention in your environment so that if the change as little behavior as possible, you still reach for the same place. And then after you complete the behavior, so you put the gum in your mouth, you give yourself a little like, yay. And and that is a small thing, but it really adds up in a way that if you weren't doing that every time, those compound and it feels a little silly, but it speaks to your subconscious mind and it compounds in a way that makes the new habit stronger than the old habit and makes it and very easy to drop the old habit.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the crucial piece of the puzzle that we're missing often. You know, that we know what we think we should be doing, and then we just fail on a regular basis to do it, and then beat ourselves up consequently, which in a way reinforces your bad habits more than it's going to break those habits. And I know there are other people who've worked and come up with materials around this topic.
James Clear has a good book on it. It's called Atomic Habits.
Yeah, Atomic Habits. That's the one I was thinking of. So replacing a habit, but the first step, spotting the habits, going on the hunt for those habits that are not serving you, no longer serving you, and very often totally can be automatic. These automatic behaviors,
and getting really specific, right? Like painfully, ridiculously specific. Because a lot of people say like, "Oh, I should eat better."
Yeah.
And like, that's not, you can't execute on that.
No.
But what you can do is like, you can pick a very specific behavior and like change that one, right? And then you can pick another really specific behavior and change that one very specific habit. So it's not thinking about like, oh, I wish I exercised more. Oh, I wish I ate differently. It's like in this exact moment, what do I wish I did differently? Like find a habit. First step, find a habit. Like don't think about goals or motivation or any of that. Just like first step, one habit. So like, I don't know, do you have any examples you'd like to talk through?
I was with a friend at the weekend, and a friend who has a treat jar. We can't stop thinking of food as a treat. Maybe that's too difficult, but what we could think about is the jar. So maybe talk me through something around that.
Yeah, so what I want to ask your friend is like, when do they go for the treat jar? Is it on the way out the door? Is it on the way home? Is it both? Is it with coffee? Like, when specifically are, because the behavior they're struggling with is like, I go to the treat jar too
Right.
often. That's too big.
Yeah.
Like what is
Yeah.
the, I go to the treat jar when I, like, in X context. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
define the context of the habit.
So it might be that you have that association with coffee, like you say. It's a very common. My husband definitely has this one. Something to go in, dip in a cup of coffee. A fairly sturdy biscuit is what he would be going for, or cookie where you're from. So. That's an association, isn't it? But there's also that emotional piece that we reach for the treat jar to boost ourselves. So
Yes, and that's real too. That's real too. Like, I don't want to undermine what I
no,
call these internal triggers of, like, it's not the exterior context. It's like, I'm bored, or I'm tired, or, and it's these internal triggers, these particular emotional states. I mean, one that I think everyone is familiar with is reaching for their phone when they're bored. Right? It's
yeah,
not any particular cue in the environment that makes people reach for their phone, but very often it's just like this the internal state of being bored. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go grab my phone.
yeah.
And so for the cookie and the coffee, for example, I would like put a spoon in front of the biscuits, or like, what is the, like, is there a substitute? Like, so a spoon is something you can stir your coffee with, as
Oh,
opposed to having the biscuit for dunking, right? So like, what is something that has as much in common with the existing habit, but you can just like substitute in for that behavior?
it's quite hard to substitute a spoon for a biscuit, I have to say.
That would be a struggle. That would be a struggle. Yeah.
We were going to talk about intermittent fasting, or
Oh, let's do it. That's
yeah,
one of my favorite behaviors.
yeah,
Like, I find
yeah.
that so many people, especially women going through menopause. So
Mm,
this is a more recent finding in the literature. Uh, Intermittent fasting is really helpful for, like, men in their 20s and women in their 50s. Like,
oh,
those are the,
fascinating fact.
yeah, those are the groups that, like, intermittent fasting is most effective for.
Oh,
And this is something that I helped my mom with. So I helped my mom figure out her intermittent fasting practice. And again, it's this finding the behaviors and finding the substitutes.
yeah.
So what are you going to do instead of lunch? Or what are you going to do instead of um, the biscuit with the coffee in the morning, right? If that's your intermittent fasting goal is like, the most common is sort of a double dinner, or like a late lunch with a dinner. So you fast for 16 to 18 hours, and then you have a late lunch and a dinner is the most common. The absolute best style of intermittent fasting, from a metabolic fitness perspective, is the double breakfast. You have a breakfast, and a little while later, you have a small lunch, and then nothing for the rest of the day. Uh, yeah, that's tough, right? Like, I
Yeah,
I couldn't do that. I don't do that. But it's, to some people, it, like, they love it. Like, they fuel up in the morning and then they don't think about food the rest of the day. But I'm
yeah,
a big dinner kind of person.
yeah. I'm a dinner kind of person. Well, a lunch person, really, actually.
Mm.
But yeah, this I was listening to Dr. David Sinclair talk in
Hmm.
great detail about the anti-aging benefits
Yes.
of fasting. And so, I really, from my perspective, I prefer to consider these lifestyle interventions from that perspective of improving the quality of our lives, improving our health overall, and less about aesthetics, although that is something to consider for lots of people, clearly. But what I love now is that there is so much evidence around the fact that these measures are helping us metabolically, and so that it really is potentially a very healthful practice, that we
Yeah,
could
absolutely.
do. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's great for cardiovascular health. It's great for preventing diabetes. And it's great for preventing various neurodegenerative brain diseases. And why does it do that? How does it do all this? So there's two main mechanisms to consider here. One is, so your body has sort of different modes that its metabolism can be in. And most people nowadays spend almost their entire lives in this sort of mode one, which is digest the food, lock the food up, right? Digest the food, bring it into your body, store it, right? And like we spend almost our entire life in that mode because it takes about 12 hours of eating, of not eating anything to get out of that first metabolic mode.
Okay.
And then the deeper versions of this of your metabolism is when you start, first you unlock that energy and start pulling it out. For you start with the sugars and the carbohydrates is the first thing that your body taps. And then you get to the lipids and then you get to the ketones in that order. And that, those deeper metabolic modes, what else is going on there? So one thing that's happening is your body is beginning to break down these unused proteins. So all the little proteins, not the big proteins in your muscles, but the little proteins that cause this or that chemical reaction, these sort of enzymatic proteins, they get used up. But if your body doesn't prioritize breaking those down if you're in that sort of first metabolic mode. It's like, oh, we'll get to that later. Like that goes in the later pile. So it gets thrown in this place. It's basically the recycling heap of the cell, and it hangs out there waiting for later. And when you do a fast, that's the later. Your body is finally not doing this important work of storing the energy, store the energy, store the energy. It's like that's off the agenda. And now it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? Oh, let's go and clean out the recycling pile. And so that's called autophagy. And this is really important for preventing both heart disease and neurodegenerative disease, because those misshapen, used up, retired proteins are the ones that build up and cause those sorts of problems. The second really important mechanism here is, so why is your body working so hard? Why is it always a priority to lock up the food? So digest the food, lock it away. Why is that such a high priority? Because if you have a lot of sugar and fat circulating in your blood all the time, you get this process called glycation, which is those damaged proteins. Sugar is sticky, right? Like honey is sticky, but it's also sticky at a microscopic level. And so it sticks onto these proteins, and now these little broken proteins are sticky as well. And that's the starting material for plaques. So that's why your body prioritizes pulling the sugar out, is because if you leave the sugar floating around, it'll grab onto the proteins, and then it'll stick to the side of your arteries. It'll stick in places it doesn't belong in your brain. It'll stick in places in your kidneys. And those sticky proteins are very problematic. And again, so intermittent fasting helps prevent those sticky proteins from forming.
That's incredible science, isn't it? Our lives are, organized in such a fashion that we're really vulnerable to making the wrong choices or less appropriate choices so much of the time. But you know what I find is, if I'm fasting, I don't even have to consider what I should have, because right now,
we're not eating right now. We're not eating right now. Yeah. Oh, what candy bar should I grab at the checkout? Oh, none, because we're not eating right now. Yeah. No, it really simplifies your decision making, right? Like easy decision making rules make sticking to a habit so much easier. So this is, intermittent fasting compared to something like keto or these other sort of eating styles. The decision rules are so simple. Like, oh, I'm just not eating right now. Like that's a much easier rule to stick to than, oh, it has to be at least 70% protein. Like who?
Oh, yes, get the scales out. No, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, it's not that we're not eating ever, because we are, and then of course, I kind of think that we still should be considering the quality of the inputs, regardless of the window that they're in. And I know there is research around feeding Is it rats or mice? I always forget what they work on. Mice?
It depends on the study. Let's say rats,
Oh, okay.
probably.
Well, anyway, they were both fed at the same window, and some of them
Hmm.
were fed rubbish food, and some of them were fed healthy food, and really the difference wasn't so great. Am I recalling this correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
But I still kind of feel like it's just the way I roll. That what we're putting into our bodies is nourishing by nature, and putting it in that smaller window of opportunity is even better. Is kind of how I think of it. So tell me if I'm right.
I definitely agree. And the way I would recommend that people figure out what's right for them, because everyone needs a little bit something different
Mm,
every different day, right? Like
mm,
it's both boring, but also not fully nourishing to have the same thing every day.
that's right. Yes.
Because everyone has a little bit of different nutritional need every day. Uh, and what I recommend to people is when you sit down to a meal, set an alarm for 2 hours. And when the alarm goes off, so you've finished your meal 2 hours later, check in with your body and see how you feel.
Um,
Was that meal nourishing for you in that moment? And your body will tell you, like your body is keeping the score. So your body will tell you if what you just ate was or wasn't helpful. You might feel heavy, or you might feel light, or you might feel light in the sense of like luminant, right? Like you might feel like you're glowing, right?
yeah.
And like, oh, okay, that worked. That was what my body needed. Or you might feel like you got this like brick sitting in your gut. Yeah, that whatever that's called. And that's like, oh, okay, that didn't nourish me. Because a lot
Mm,
of things, in the same way we have the snack foods around us all the time, they're engineered to be to taste very good in that first bite, right? They're engineered for that first bite. What they're not engineered for is feeling great 2 hours
yeah.
later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by listening to your body, again, it helps you by bringing attention to it, by calling attention to how you feel afterwards, it at a subconscious level will affect the way you're thinking the next time you have the opportunity to eat. So your body will hear the feedback more clearly if you call attention to it and say, hey,
Yeah.
look at this, look at how we feel. That's what's important to me. That's where I'm directing my attention. It'll feed back into your subconscious the next time you're making a choice.
Yeah. So, in the same way that you are using your conscious mind to draw attention to unwanted, undesirable habits, then we can use that same approach to become more aware of desirable consequences of what we're doing as well. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so it is, and of course I say, and there it says it. I'm a movement specialist. I'm a physiotherapist, and I teach Pilates and yoga. And my mission in my lifetime is to help people to move more, to move well, and to really just feel fantastic because of it. Now, and the same really applies with movement. Not all movement is equal, and not everybody needs the same thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
so there
Mm-hmm.
are really
Mm-hmm.
significant parallels. And is it serving you when you're doing your high intensity interval training, or would you be better doing some yoga? And different bodies are going to react differently. But the one thing that we do know is movement is medicine, and we do need to do this stuff. If not moving is the habit, and you want to get a new habit of moving, how
Yeah.
can we help me? Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. So like the first thing I would discuss with a client is where do you want that movement in your life? So again, I'd search for these habit moments. So I've got about 60 seconds in the morning that it takes for my espresso to pull, and instead of just like staring at it, trying to burn a hole through it with my eyes while I'm like eagerly awaiting that espresso, I could take 60 seconds to go through a movement routine while that is happening. So that's a moment in my life where I could inject some movement. Or again, when I get down to the car in the morning for my commute to work,
Mm,
uh, can I take 30 seconds and do a movement before I get into my car. One that, and this is a somewhat trivial movement, but it's one that there's been a lot of research on, which is flossing.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
been a great deal of research trying to figure out how do we get people to floss more.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's recommended there, shown to be effective, is if first you figure out when you want to floss. Okay, so you identify that time, and then the first day that you're building the habit, you floss just one tooth. You're not allowed to floss your whole mouth. You must floss just one tooth. And what that does is it inserts the beginning of the behavior into your routine in the lowest effort way possible. So if you get down to the car, you're like, oh, if I'm in such a hurry, I don't have time for my movements today. You got what, like, so you tell me, what is that floss one tooth that like keeps the habit alive so that the next day you're like the opportunity, you still remember the opportunity of like, oh, this is my movement time, as opposed to when things get busy, you throw the habit away. So like, what would you say is that you can shrink it down to?
You know, when you said about going to the car, what flew into my mind was walking lunges on the way there. I mean, you know, you're going there anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Perfect.
you know, I mean, I said this to a client this afternoon that, you know, I would go for a walk and stop at a bench and do tricep dips because I'm obsessed with triceps. As a woman, it matters to me. So, you know, and I never cared that people thought I was maybe a little bit daft. It doesn't bother me. And you know what? For the most part, people really could not be bothered less what you were doing, could they? So if you threw in a few walking lunges on the way to your car, or even a few high knees, say, for instance, you know, whatever it might be that you want to circle your arms around as you're on the way, just inflating the lungs with extra oxygen, breathing in the fresh morning air. Oh my gosh, I feel good at the thought of it, honestly. So,
Healthy is not normal. Healthy is not normal.
well, that
Like,
must be
it's
why you
unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but it's true, right? Like statistically, I'm most familiar with the US case. Less than 1/3 of people in the US, 1/3 of adults have a normal BMI. I don't know what normal means when less than a third of people have normal, but I assume there's some similarly depressing statistic for movement. But you know, accept that. Lean into it. You want to be healthy? I'm sorry, you're signing up to be not normal. That's the fact of it. Like if you want to be healthy, you're not going to be normal. So, you know, lean in on that. Accept that's the decision you've made.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're giving me permission here not to be normal. And it feels so good, I have to say. Yeah, so little, and you know, and people set themselves up to fail with thinking that an hour at the gym is the gold standard, and that's what they're aiming for. You know, the movement snacks that we can sprinkle through the day, you know, is really, I do remember the flossing one tooth at a time.
I got one more for you. So it goes to flossing too, and I'm sure it maps to movement, is when you're flossing, don't think to yourself, I'm preventing cavities, or this is going to be great 20 years from now and I don't have to go to the dentist for a filling.
Yeah.
Think about how it feels good right now. So find a way to enjoy the process.
Yes.
A lot of these things we do, and we kind of, like you were saying before, we kind of beat ourselves up in the process of like, this is awful and I hate it, but it's worth it. Like, that's a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
Find a way, find some aspect of it that you enjoy and like place your attention there and find a way to enjoy the process. So what do you enjoy about the process of tricep dips? Like, what about that is like enjoyable? Like, where do you feel it in your body and how does it feel that is like the enjoyable part of it?
You know what I love about doing things like that, and that what is one of them, is it gives me a feeling of strength and power. So it isn't about the muscle, It isn't about how I look. It is entirely about shifting how I feel. And in that moment, I mean, am I wrong to feel like this? A power that being, you know, as a woman, strength is something that I value, particularly as a woman, perhaps. So yeah, and that's me. And for you, it could be entirely different, couldn't it?
Yeah, no, that's a great one though. Like, and in the moment, like, feel this is my power, right? I'm feeling my power and I enjoy that feeling of feeling my power.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And knowing that this is doing me good. I love the idea in my mind that this is doing me good too. But yeah, no, you're quite right. To have that sort of immediate sense of feeling that this is helping you somehow, and in whatever way you feel that's appropriate. But, you know, this is something I do when I teach all the time. The quick things that we can do to help you to touch your toes, release the fascia on the sole of your foot, and away you go. Before you know it, a minute or two of doing that, and your toes will suddenly feel a whole lot nearer. You know, instead of let's spend 3 hours stretching the hamstrings, and you know, because that's unrealistic.
Yeah. No, I in my morning meetings, I've gotten into the habit of I don't know, this is my foot. Like, sort of like I do this with my toe. Like, I like pull my toe to the outside. And I do that during my morning meetings.
Oh, flexing your foot. So is that inside your shoes, just to be curious?
Yes.
Yeah, you haven't.
So I wear very loose shoes. I wear very loose shoes, but yeah.
Spacious footwear. I'm all in favour of that. And yeah, something nobody knows you're doing it. It's a bit like pelvic floor exercises.
I was going to say I didn't know if that was appropriate for this conversation, but there's always the Kegel exercises is another one. Like, no one knows.
No one knows you're doing it. And I'm fascinated with the big toe abduction. Are you worried it's going off track or something?
No, nothing in particular. It's just one, again, I can do with no one watching, and I find it difficult. Like, it's a good challenge, sort of like I can only blink with this eye, and so, like, I can't blink with this eye. So like I sometimes try to think, like, can I wink? Can I wink with my left eye? So it's like a challenging thing like that. Like, it's a difficult movement to isolate.
Yeah. Well, isolating movements is generally very difficult, and so we need a whole lot of body awareness to do that. And so there, you know, these parallels around bringing things into the conscious mind, so that we are more aware of how we're going about our lives, and that is really the first step to making those lifestyle changes, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It is. Awareness comes first.
Why don't you tell me what temper is? Why don't you just tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a combination of coaching. So a lot of what we talked about today, but in a personal level. So if you'd like to go through the exercises that we just went through and you have some specific problem you'd like to work through, our coaches are great for that. And then it's combined with what we call an intermittent fasting mint. So this is a product that it blocks your craving so that you can really feel your hunger. So those automatic, like, you get to the grocery store aisle and you see all the candy bars and you have a craving. This is a product that inhibits that, and it inhibits it. So the molecule itself is very similar to the cannabinoid THC.
Right.
And it bonds to that part of your brain where you get the munchies, except instead of activating the munchies, it blocks them. And so it basically gives you the anti-munchies for 3 to 5 hours. And so you don't have cravings. You can still feel your hunger and respect your hunger, but you don't have those sort of automatic subliminal cravings after taking the mint. And so that's what we sell at Temper, is that combination of those mints with a coach to help you figure out the best way to implement intermittent fasting.
The product alone is really a very small part of the solution, isn't it?
Yeah, we think so. If you'd like to hear more, if you'd like to talk to one of our coaches, if you'd like to try any of our products, you can find us at usetemper.com, usetemper.com.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, coming along and talking all about how we can add healthy habits into our lives, remove the less than helpful habits, and incorporate or consider whether intermittent fasting might just be a way for you to manage and optimize your health. It's something that I practice. It's something that I do, and I'm guessing that you do too, Dalton.
I do.
So, well, thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much for giving me time. And let's stay in touch and keep me up to speed with what you're getting up to.
Absolutely.
And so for now, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye for now.